Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! It was about 2 years ago when my wife Sarah and I were moving out of our old apartment. We've been there for a while, but it was time for a change. Moving day finally arrived and our landlord showed up to do the final walkthrough. We went through the whole apartment with him room by room. He had a few small complaints here and there, nothing major. The landlord says, "This scratch on the kitchen counter. It wasn't here before." "Oh, that? I'm pretty sure that was there when we moved in." Well, I suppose it's not that bad." We continued like this, with him pointing at little things and us explaining or agreeing to minor issues. By the end of it, he seemed satisfied. "Well, everything looks mostly in order. I will refund your full deposit." "Great, thank you. We've enjoyed living here." Sarah adds, "Yes, thank you for everything." We shook hands and parted ways on good terms, or so we thought. A few days went by and we were settling into our new place when we got a voicemail from the landlord. His voice was angry and loud. The voicemail went like this: "Listen here, you two. I've been renovating the apartment and the room that was your office smells absolutely terrible. Your cats must have been urinating in there constantly. You need to come back and fix this yourselves. I'm talking new wallpaper, replacing the wood flooring, repainting everything. If you don't, I'll get a health inspector and contractors involved, and you'll be paying for all of it." Sarah and I looked at each other completely confused. We do have cats, so at first we didn't completely dismiss it, but the more we thought about it, the less sense it made. Sarah says, "That's impossible, right? You were in that office every day." "Exactly, and we had the whole place professionally cleaned before we left. There's no way it could have been that bad without us noticing. Maybe a raccoon got in after we left? Or a pipe burst? Could be. Either way, it's not our fault." We decided to call the landlord back to clear things up. Big mistake. "Hello, landlord? We got your message about the office." "Oh, so you finally decided to own up to your mess?" "Actually, we're calling to let you know that we're not responsible for whatever has happened. We left the apartment in good condition." "Don't you dare try to twist this around. The place is a disaster because of you and those filthy animals of yours." Sarah adds, "Sir, please. We had the apartment professionally cleaned. There is no way." "Lies, all lies. I'll make sure you pay for every cent of damage you've caused." This back and forth went on for about 10 minutes. He kept making wild claims about the state of the apartment, things that definitely weren't true when we left. Eventually, I'd had enough. I tell him, "Hey, this conversation isn't going anywhere. We're not paying for damage we didn't cause. Goodbye." I hung up, my hand shaking with anger and frustration. Sarah asks me, "What are we going to do?" "I don't know, but we're not paying for his renovations." For weeks after that, we were on edge. Every time the mail came, we worried it would be a massive bill from the landlord. It was really starting to mess with our heads. And of course, we never got our deposit back either. Seeing Sarah so worried all the time started to make me really angry. I decided to do some research to see what our options were, and that's when I stumbled upon something interesting. In our area, if a landlord doesn't formally claim a reason for keeping a deposit within 6 months of the end of the lease, they are legally required to refund it. I didn't tell Sarah right away, I wanted to be sure. I calculated the exact date when the 6 months will be up, and it was about 3 months away. I figured we could wait it out and then it would be our turn to make a move. Those 3 months were tough. Sarah kept worrying about when the landlord would send us a bill. I tried to reassure her, but I didn't want to get her hopes up about the deposit in case something went wrong. Finally, the day came. 6 months and 1 day after our lease ended, and I sent the landlord a message. "Hello, please refund our deposit within 2 weeks. Thank you." He replies back with a text, "Yeah, sure, buddy." I showed Sarah the messages. "Do you think he'll actually do it?" she asks. Honestly, no, but that's okay. We've got a plan. We waited the 2 weeks. No money came. So we sent a formal letter giving him a second deadline. Again, nothing happened. I was actually hoping for this at this point. Now what? Sarah asks. Now we bring in the big guns. We hired an attorney named Lisa to collect the money on our behalf. When she contacted the landlord, he started claiming all sorts of ridiculous damages that supposedly justify keeping our deposit. Lisa simply dismissed them all. Lisa, on the phone with us, I've informed the landlord that the time for making such claims has long since passed. He's legally obligated to return your deposit now. A few days later, we got a notification that the landlord had made a payment, but it was only about 80% of what he owed us. Is he serious? He's still trying to keep some of it? I say, what do we do now? We let Lisa handle it. Lisa had to go after him again for the full amount. It seemed like the landlord didn't realize that every time Lisa had to deal with him, he was racking up more charges. He was legally responsible for paying our attorney fees in this situation. And finally, after what felt like forever, we got the news we've been waiting for. The landlord had paid the full deposit, plus interest, plus a massive bill for our lawyer. Way more than the deposit itself. When everything was settled, Sarah and I sat in our new home's garden. We had a bottle of wine and the old rental agreement. Sarah says, I can't believe it's finally over. I believe it. And look what I brought. I pulled out a lighter and held it up with a grin. Oh, you didn't. Oh, but I did. We laughed as we watched the old rental agreement go up in flames. It felt like we were burning away all the stress and worry of the past few months. So what should we do with the deposit money? Sarah asks. Well, I was thinking. We spent the rest of the evening planning how to spend our hard-won deposit. It felt good to finally put the whole ordeal behind us. Looking back, I still can't believe how the landlord tried to take advantage of us. But I'm glad we stood our ground and didn't let him get away with it. Sure, the whole experience was stressful, but the feeling of finally getting justice was worth it. Plus, now we have a great story to tell at parties. And every time I smell something funky, I can't help but think of the landlord and his mysterious, smelly office. I hope he eventually found the real culprit. Maybe that raccoon we imagined. As for Sarah and me, we're happy in our new place, no mysterious smells, no angry landlords, just us and our cats living our best life. And every now and then, when we're enjoying a glass of wine in our garden, we raise a toast to the landlord and the deposit he tried so hard to keep. Here is to karma, legal justice, and a sweet taste of victory. It all started when I decided to build a nice doghouse for my furry buddy, Max. I mean, who doesn't want their dog to have a cozy place to chill, right? So I spent a weekend putting together this sweet little house in my backyard. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple wooden structure with a sloped roof to keep the rain out. Max loved it, and I was pretty proud of my handiwork. But then enter Karen. Now, Karen wasn't just any neighbor, she was the president of our homeowners association. And boy, did she take that job seriously, like way too seriously. It was about a week after I finished the doghouse when Karen showed up at my door. I opened it and there she was with her trademark scowl and a clipboard in hand. Did you get approval from the homeowners association before building that thing in your backyard? No, it's just a doghouse, Karen. I didn't think I needed permission for that. Well, you thought wrong. That structure violates several of our bylaws. It's an eyesore and it needs to go. Come on, it's not hurting anyone. Max loves it. I don't care what your dog loves. You have 48 hours to remove it, or you will be fined. And with that, she stormed off. I was stunned. I mean, who gets this worked up over a doghouse? I decided to ignore her. Surely she'd realize how ridiculous this was and let it go, right? Wrong. 2 days later, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was a fine for $500 for unauthorized construction of failure to comply with homeowners association directives. I couldn't believe it. I crumpled up the notice and tossed it in the trash. There was no way I was paying that. Over the next few weeks, the fines kept coming. $500 turned into $1,000, then $1,500. Karen would stop by every few days, each time looking more and more like she was about to explode. You need to take that monstrosity down and pay your fines immediately. Karen, it's a doghouse. You're being unreasonable. Unreasonable? I'm enforcing the rules that keep this neighborhood beautiful and our property values high. You're the one being unreasonable by refusing to comply. This back and forth went on for a while. I started avoiding her when I saw her coming. My neighbor Tom would often shake his head sympathetically when he saw Karen storming away from my house. Tom asks, "She giving you trouble about that doghouse again?" "Yeah, she's relentless. I don't get why it bothers her so much. Some people just can't stand it when others don't bow to their authority. Be careful though, Karen's been known to take things too far sometimes." I should have listened to Tom more carefully, but I had a business trip coming up, and I was more focused on getting ready for that. The morning I was set to leave, I dropped Max off at Tom's place. "Thanks for watching him, Tom. I really appreciate it." "No problem at all. Max is always welcome here. You have a good trip, and don't worry about a thing." Little did I know just how much I would end up worrying. I was 2 days into my trip when I got a frantic call from Tom. "You need to come back right away. Karen's lost her mind." "What? What happened?" "She set fire to Max's doghouse. I caught her in the act and called the cops, but man, it's a mess over here." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I immediately booked a flight home, my mind racing the whole time. When I finally got back, I couldn't believe what I saw. Whereas Max's dog had stood was now just a charred spot on the ground. The grass around it was scorched and there was still a faint smell of smoke in the air. Tom filled me in on what happened. He'd been out in his yard when he smelled smoke. He looked over and saw Karen pouring something on a doghouse and then striking a match. Tom yelled at her to stop, but she looked at him with this crazed expression and tossed the match. Tom sprinted over, grabbing his garden hose. On the way, he managed to keep the fire from spreading to my house or the fence, but the doghouse was already engulfed by the time he got there. Meanwhile, Karen just stood there watching the flames with this eerie smile on her face. Tom says, "I've never seen anything like it. It was like she was in a trance or something. When she finally snapped out of it and realized what she'd done, she tried to run. But I wasn't having any of that. I grabbed her arm and held onto her until the police arrived. I was in shock. I mean, who does something like this? Over a doghouse?" I immediately pressed charges. The police took statements from both Tom and me, and Karen was arrested on the spot. She was charged with arson, destruction of property, and reckless endangerment. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Karen tried to claim that she was just enforcing the rules and that she never meant for things to get so out of hand. But the judge wasn't buying it. In the end, she was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution for the damages. As for the homeowners association, they were horrified by what happened. Karen was immediately removed from her position as president, and they issued a formal apology to me for all the trouble. They even revised their bylaws to make it clear that small structures like doghouses were perfectly acceptable without prior approval. But the best part? I used the money from Karen's restitution to build Max an even better doghouse. This time I went all out. We're talking insulated walls, a little porch, and even a tiny window. It's practically a doggy mansion. You know what? The other neighbors loved it. Some have even asked me for tips on building their own. Looking back, I can't just believe how crazy this all got. I mean, it's a doghouse for crying out loud, but I guess some people just can't handle it when things don't go their way. As for Karen, last I heard, she's still in prison, probably dreaming up new homeowners association rules to enforce when she gets out. What do you think of your new place, buddy? Max just wags his tail and gives a happy bark. He doesn't care about homeowners associations or crazy neighbors. He's just glad to have a cool place to hang out. And honestly, after everything that happened, that's all that really matters to me too. Tom often comes over and we laugh about the whole ordeal while watching Max enjoy his new digs. You know, in a weird way, we should thank Karen. Without her, Max wouldn't have this palace. Tom says, "True, but let's not invite her to the housewarming party, okay?" We both crack up at that. It's good to be able to laugh about it now. Every time I look at that doghouse, I'm reminded that sometimes Standing up for what's right, even if it's just a simple doghouse, is absolutely worth it. Just maybe next time I'll make sure my fire insurance is up to date first. I never thought I'd be in this mess. It all started when my grandma had to move into a nursing home after my grandpa passed away. We were all devastated, but we knew it was for the best because grandma couldn't take care of that big house and property on her own anymore. So we decided to put their house and barn on the market through a local realtor. And that's when everything went sideways. A second realtor in the same office, who also happens to be on the county planning commission, discovered that half of the property isn't even ours. Can you believe it? After 40 years. Let me back up a bit and explain. My grandparents' property is in Oregon, surrounded by fields and forest, owned by the kids of the original owner who built the house. They are our closest neighbors, if you can call them that. From what I understand, after the original owners died, their kids split the house from the farmland and forest. They sold it to someone else, who then had a realtor sell it to my grandparents a few years later. The thing is, it was sold to my grandma as if it was all one piece of property. It had a house, a chicken coop, and an orchard. My grandpa even built a barn by the orchard a few years after they moved in. Now, 40 years later, we find out that the property paperwork and the local engineering department have documents showing the property line my grandparents were sold only includes the house. The coop, orchard, and the barn my grandpa built, apparently they are not on our land. When I found out, I called my grandma right away. Grandma, did you know the property is actually 5 acres? What are you talking about? It's only 2 acres. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The realtor found out that you only own 2 acres where the house sits. The rest, including the barn, coop, and orchard, isn't legally yours. That can't be right. We've been living here for 40 years. I know it's crazy. Apparently, no one ever measured or got anything inspected to make sure it was accurate. So, what does this mean? It means that the neighbor gets the barn, coop, and orchard, half of your property for free. But your grandpa built that barn, and we've been paying taxes and insurance on it for years. I know, Grandma, it's a mess. We were told there was something called adverse possession. It will cost Grandma $100,000 to get her lost property back. She can't afford that, so the new owners will gain a $300,000 profit on that property, according to our realtor. Plus, they get the barn repairs Grandma just paid for. I tried to convince her to wait before selling, but she refused. She already sold it to someone who happens to be friends with these neighbors. And get this friend/new owner has already admitted to her and us that a property/barn deal is going down between him and these neighbors. I confronted the neighbor about this whole situation. How can you just take half of my grandparents' property like this? Look, I know it's complicated, but legally, that land has always been ours. Your grandparents were just using it all these years. But they paid taxes on it. They maintained it. My grandpa even built a barn there. I understand you're upset, but that doesn't change the legal situation. We can't legally sell it to anyone because it's too small to divide and sell in our county. But you're making a deal with a new owner, aren't you? That's a private matter between us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This whole situation felt like a nightmare. I started researching and asking around, trying to figure out what our options were. First, I called a local lawyer to get some advice. I asked, can they legally profit off the barn my grandpa built 20 to 30 years ago and had repaired last month? The lawyer tells me, unfortunately, if the barn is on their property, legally it belongs to them. It's a complex situation, but generally structures become part of the land they are built on. Can my grandma legally request they pay her for the barn from their property profits? She could try to negotiate with them, but legally they are not obligated to pay her for the barn if it's on their property. Is it true that it could cost $100,000 to pay the neighbor or get that land back? That's what the engineering office said it will cost. Adverse possession cases can be expensive, and $100,000 isn't unheard of. It involves court fees, surveying costs, and potentially a long legal battle. Are there free ways to fight this loss? There aren't many free options in legal matters like this. You could try mediation or negotiation, but if it goes to court, there will be costs involved. Can I legally have the barn dismantled and rebuilt on my own property? Or will they sue me for stealing the barn even though my grandparents paid for and had it built on property they didn't know they didn't own? I wouldn't recommend that. Even though your grandparents built it, if it's on their property, removing it could be considered theft or destruction of property. It is best to negotiate or seek legal remedies. After talking to the lawyer, I felt even more frustrated. How could this even happen? Who divides a house and property off of farmland and neglects to include the orchard and coop that goes with it and is fenced with? We have a suspicion that this was planned all along so these neighbors could have an investment when my grandparents passed. I decided to dig deeper into the history of the property, and I went to the county records office and started looking through old documents. It took hours, but I finally found something interesting. The next day, I called a family meeting with my parents and siblings. Guys, I found something in the county records. The original deed from when Grandma and Grandpa bought the place actually does include all 5 acres. That says what? How is that possible? The realtor said, I know, but look at this copy of the deed. It clearly states 5 acres, including the orchard and outbuildings. So why did the engineering department have different records? That's what we need to figure out. I think there might have been a mistake in the records at some point. What does this mean for Grandma? It means we might have a case. We need to talk to a real estate lawyer. We decided to pool our resources and hire a real estate attorney specializing in property disputes. After reviewing our documents, he agreed to take the case. He says, based on the original deed and the fact that your grandparents have been using and maintaining the entire 5 acres for 40 years, we have a strong case for adverse possession. Even if the neighbors claim ownership, your grandparents' long-term use of the property gives them a legitimate claim. But what about the sale? Grandma already sold the property. Lawyer says, well, that complicates things. But it doesn't necessarily negate your grandmother's claim. We'll need to involve a new buyer in this process. First, we will file a quiet title action to establish your grandmother's ownership of the full 5 acres. Over the next few months, we went through a legal battle. It was stressful and expensive, but we were determined to fight for what was rightfully our grandparents. The neighbors tried to argue that they had always owned the land, but our lawyer presented evidence of my grandparents' continuous use and maintenance of our property for over 40 years. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we got the judgment. The court ruled in our favor, recognizing my grandma's claim to the entire 5 acres through adverse possession. The neighbors were ordered to pay back the property taxes my grandparents had paid on the disputed land over the years. As for the sale, a new buyer agreed to honor the original sale agreement, which now included the full 5 acres. They even offered to pay my grandma extra for the barn and recent repairs, recognizing the value it added to the property. In the end, justice was delivered, but it was a hard-fought battle. We learned some valuable lessons though. 1. Always get a proper survey done when buying property. 2. Keep good records of property maintenance and improvements. 3. Don't assume that long-term use equals ownership without proper documentation. 4. When in doubt, consult with a real estate attorney before making any big decisions. This whole ordeal has been a wake-up call for our family. We're now making sure all of our properties are properly surveyed and documented. And we're spreading the word to friends and neighbors, hoping to prevent others from going through what we did. It's been a long and difficult journey, but I'm glad that we didn't give up. I never signed up for this. Working at Adventure World isn't always fun and games, even though we have a giant slide that's supposed to be the main attraction. My job is to help people get on a slide safely, but sometimes I have to deal with difficult guests. This is a story of one of those times. It was a busy Saturday afternoon and I was in my usual spot at the top of the big slide. Families were lining up, excited to take the plunge. That's when I noticed them, a dad and his young son, probably around 6 years old. The kid looked terrified, but his dad was grinning from ear to ear. As they got closer, I could hear the boy whimpering. When they reached the front of the line, the dad practically dragged his son to the slide entrance. Dad says, "Come on, champ, it's gonna be so much fun." "No, Daddy, I don't want to. I'm scared." The poor kid was shaking like a leaf. I've seen nervous children before, but this was different. He was genuinely frightened. I decided to step in and try to help. "Hey there, buddy. Is everything okay?" The dad answered before the boy could even open his mouth. "Oh, he's fine. Just a little nervous. Right, sport?" The boy shook his head frantically, tears streaming down his face. "I want mommy. I don't want to go on this slide." I knelt down to the boy's level, trying to make eye contact with him. "It's okay if you don't want to go on the slide. Nobody's forcing you." "Nonsense. He'll love it once he tries it." The dad grabbed his son and practically shoved him onto the slide platform. The boy was full on crying now, and other guests were starting to stare. "Sir, I really think we should." "He just needs a little push, that's all." I turned my attention back to the boy who was sitting at the top of the slide, clutching the sides for dear life. "Hey buddy, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. It's okay to be scared." The boy sniffled and looked at me with big watery eyes. "I don't want to push. Can I pull myself down?" Before I could even answer, the dad butted in again. "No way. I'm gonna give you a big push, and you'll zoom down super fast." The kid lost it. He started wailing and trying to scramble out the slide. I could feel my blood starting to boil, but I tried to keep my cool. "Sir, your son clearly doesn't want to do this. Maybe we should—" "Oh, come on. Kids, right? They never know what's good for them." He looked around at the other guests, grinning like an idiot as if expecting them to agree with him, but everyone just looked uncomfortable and annoyed. Some parents were even shielding their own kids' eyes from the scene. I stood up and faced the dad, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you force your son down the slide. It's against our safety regulations." "What? That's ridiculous. I pay good money for these tickets." "I understand, sir. But your son's safety and comfort come first." The dad glared at me for a moment, then threw his hands up in frustration. "Fine, we'll do it your way." He turned to his son, who was still sopping on a slide platform. "All right, you big baby. Go take the stairs if you're too scared." The boy scrambled to his feet and ran to the stairs, not even looking back at his dad. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. "Well, if he won't do it, I might as well have some fun myself." Before I could stop him, the dad plopped down on a slide. He pulled out his phone and started fiddling with it. "Hey you, slide guy, give me a push, will ya?" I stared at him in disbelief. After all that drama, he wanted me to push him down the slide? I looked around at the other guests who were all watching with a mix of curiosity and disgust. That's when I made a split-second decision. As the dad was busy trying to set up his phone to record, I stepped forward and gave him a hefty shove. He yelped in surprise as he went flying down the slide, his arms flailing as he tried to grab onto his slide mat. "Whoa, hey, what the?" His voice faded as he disappeared down the chute. I couldn't help but smile as I heard his startled yells echoing all the way down. The other guests burst into applause and cheers. I felt a little guilty for losing my cool, but man, it felt good to see that jerk get a taste of his own medicine. As I turned back to help the next group, I saw my supervisor heading towards me with a concerned look on her face. I knew I was probably in for a lecture, but I didn't regret what I'd done. She asks, "What happened up here?" "I just saw a man come flying out the slide, shouting about being pushed." I took a deep breath and explained the whole situation. And to my surprise, my supervisor's expression softened as I told her about the scared little boy and his pushy dad. "I see. Well, we can't have guests manhandling their children or disrupting the ride. You did the right thing by intervening." "And the push?" She gave me a small smile. "Let's just say I didn't see anything. But maybe be a little gentler next time, okay?" I nodded, feeling relieved. As my supervisor walked away, I turned back to the line of waiting guests. A little girl at the front gave me a big thumbs up, and I couldn't help but grin. For the rest of my shift, I kept an eye out for the angry dad, half expecting him to come storming back up the stairs to complain. But he never showed up again. I guess he'd had enough of the big slides for one day. As I helped more families enjoy the ride safely, I thought about the little boy. I hoped he was okay and that maybe his dad had learned a lesson about respecting his son's feelings. But knowing entitled parents like him, I doubted it. The day went on and soon it was time for my break. As I headed to the employee lounge, I overheard some guests talking about the crazy dad who got pushed down the slide. I smiled to myself, knowing that I'll probably be hearing that story for a while. In the lounge, my coworker Jake was already there, munching on a sandwich. Hey, slide master, heard you had some excitement up there today. Ah, you could say that. Just another day dealing with entitled parents, I guess. Man, I don't know how you do it. I'll lose my mind if I had to deal with people like that all day. Trust me, sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind, but then I remember all the kids who actually have fun on the slide, and it makes it worth it. We chatted for a bit longer, swapping stories about the weirdest guests we encountered. And before I knew it, my break was over, and it was time to head back to the slide. As I climbed the stairs to my post, I saw a familiar face waiting in line. It was a little boy from earlier, but this time he was with a woman I assumed was his mom. He looked much happier now, even excited. When they reached the front of the line, the mom gave me a warm smile. Hi there. My son told me what happened earlier with his father. Just wanted to thank you for looking out for him. I felt my cheeks flush a little. Oh, it was nothing. I'm just glad he's okay. The boy tugged on his mom's sleeve and whispered something to her. She nodded encouragingly. Mr. Slideman? I think I want to try that slide now. But can you help me? I knelt down to his level just like I had earlier, and I said, of course, buddy. We'll take it nice and slow, okay? You can even pull yourself down if you want to. The boy nodded, a determined look on his face. I helped him get settled on a slide mat, making sure he was comfortable. Ready when you are, champ. He took a deep breath and gave me a little nod. Slowly, he scooted forward until gravity took over. As he started to slide down, a big grin spread across his face. Whee! I could hear him laughing all the way down. His mom beamed at me before following her son down the slide. As I watched him go, I felt a warmth in my chest. This is why I do this job, I thought. Not for the entitled parents or the drama, but for moments like these, when a kid overcomes their fear and discovers a joy of something new. The rest of my shift flew by without any more incidents. As I clocked out at the end of the day, I couldn't help but feel pretty good about how things had turned out. Sure, dealing with entitled people can be a real pain sometimes, but standing up for what's right and helping kids have fun? That's what makes this job worth it. As I walked to my car, I chuckled to myself, wondering if that dad would ever show his face at Adventure World again. Something told me he might think twice before trying to bully his kid onto a ride next time. And if he did come back, well, let's just say I'll be ready with another push. This time, a gentle nudge in the right direction.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.